I remember actually when I was managing global accounts at Facebook, I'd usually be working with American companies, but helping advise them on how they do things in the Middle East. So like Chevrolet Arabia, for example, or P&G in North Africa, Egypt, etc. And I remember some things that sound so obvious when you think about it weren't being implemented by the American headquarters of P&G or Ford Motor Company, etc. Where, for example, I remember it took some time to convince to convince the people who are creating, let's say, advertising and marketing material from headquarters to understand that, you kind of need Arabic translations or subtitles or Arabic creative in the videos that you're running to sell cars or to sell product. And those things might sound obvious, but it's actually not always the case that a big American brand who has a huge presence in a place like the Middle East or South Asia, they don't always immediately think, oh, that's a good idea. We should edit and localize our content. And that's changing because I would imagine 20 years ago, it's even less obvious to, let's say, global headquarters. But as these regions are becoming more important, it's more critical to success that a company that's a major multinational really understands the local market. And it could be in something as simple as having subtitles, having videos that aren't just white American people in your advertising, but local people from the Middle East.
Well, that's why I hire you guys. Tell them that.
Yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time. I mentioned earlier that you kind of have to be like a diplomat to work in emerging markets, and I felt like a lot of my job at Facebook was in some ways diplomacy. I'd be going to Dubai and talking to the local teams there, my local clients, about campaigns they're running all across the region. And part of the challenge was them saying, well, I just feel like our headquarters, like let's say Ford Motor Company, for example, they just don't really get it. And I have to spend a lot of time kind of being a translator because then I'd be flying to Detroit the day later to talk to the global teams. And I've noticed that there's this misunderstanding and undervaluing that comes from how people outside of emerging markets view emerging markets. And I, over the past few years, especially after leaving Facebook, doing some work in Pakistan, was really blown away by some things I didn't necessarily realize that are trends that you won't know unless you're on the ground. So for example, when I was in Karachi 2-3 years ago, I was at a local startup that just raised a lot of money, is doing really well. And I was meeting the two co-founders, and I wrote an article about this on my newsletter. But one of the co-founders had just gotten his master's in like AI from Stanford, and the other one had gotten an MBA from Michigan. And they had told me that they moved back to Pakistan the last year because and more than any other time, feel optimistic and passionate about Pakistan's future. 10, 20 years ago, they're trying to get out. 10, 20 years ago, they're like, there's no way I'm bringing my family to Pakistan. I'm going to the US. But now there's this shift. In China, there's this term, sea turtles, people that get educated overseas and come back to China. But you're seeing this sort of sea turtle trend happening across all emerging markets where, particularly Pakistan, people are coming back to their home countries feeling more optimistic about the future of their home countries than ever before. And that's what makes an emerging market emerge, right? It's people actually come back as human capital to make their country even better. And I know Ali has a lot of experience working with how undervalued emerging markets are, setting the stage for what people think about them. And I'd love to hear from Ali, like what are some actually big misunderstandings that you experience, having spent a lot of time both in the East and in the West?
To be honest, spot on, Anthony. I mean, I'll start with what you mentioned about language, right? Just kind of how localization is key to adoption in many ways. But similar to how I was talking about digitization bringing about and unlocking growth, what we see is, the world's going mobile first, right? Everything is going mobile first. My wife is in healthcare. She was talking to a robotic surgeon out of Singapore on a podcast today, and she's like, where do you see this industry in 15 years? And he says, I see this industry where my job will be replaced by a robot, where people will get their diagnosis on their phone, and they will choose their surgery on their phone, and they will book an appointment and come into a room where there will be a robot who will do the surgery for them, and then they will walk out of there without any recovery time. That's mind-blowing, right? But it's all done through the phone.
I prefer a doctor, for the record. Krishna prefers doctors.
Well, so he had an interesting fact on that, right? He said we did a survey. In the UK, 50% of the people wanted a human doctor. In Nigeria, 75% of the people wanted a robot, because it's all relevant to the quality of healthcare you have in your nation, right? And this is the advancement we're seeing, and it's all going to be powered by a handheld, right? So when you see that, to your point on language, even in Pakistan, what I saw when I was there was that we are moving from having local script of the Urdu language to adopting Roman English script of the Urdu language on mobile-based platforms to increase adoption because it fits design better, right? I mean, so that's how that world is changing. But when you talk about misunderstandings, by and large, I agree with you, right? There's a misconception to treat the region as a whole.